AZ. Am I feeling better? No, I'm not feeling better. Because apparently people who are big StarCraft fans don't know who I am. They don't know who I am. Do you guys fucking see this shit? This guy comes to my house yesterday when my stream's done. And he's like, sees my studio and he's like, what the fuck? What's this? He was like, oh, what's this that you do? And I was like, oh, I do streaming and the YouTubes and stuff. And he's like, oh, and he saw my table tennis table and he's like, oh, you like one of those guys who, he's like, oh, you like that guy who did 1,000 hours of table tennis and then got really good at it. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. He's like, oh yeah, there's this YouTube channel of this guy who spends 1,000 hours every day just learning a skill until he gets to be like semi-pro at that skill. And he's like, he did it with table tennis. I've never heard of this guy. Sounds like a cool channel. That's awesome. I'm like, no, I just fuck around with table tennis. I'm really bad at it. I was like, I do StarCraft. And he's like, StarCraft? He's like, I love StarCraft. And he's like, he's like, I look more like I play StarCraft than you. You don't look like you play StarCraft. And I was like, are you judging me on my appearance? Are you judging me? Don't judge a book by its cover. And he was like, I'm like, people who look Asian don't have the fucking, the dominance on playing StarCraft. But he was like, oh, you don't know, man, you look kind of white. You look like a bit of a Chad. And I was like, what the fuck? I play StarCraft. So anyways, he's like, dude, I love StarCraft. I watch StarCraft all the time. And I was like, oh, StarCraft 2? And he's like, yeah, StarCraft 2. He's like, oh, I love TLO. I'm like, cool. He's like, oh, I love that Terran player. What's his name? He's like, oh shit, man, I'm having a mental blank. And I'm like, oh, Maru? He's like, no, I don't like Maru. He's like, Maru's good at StarCraft, but I don't like him that much. I'm like, he's like, oh, the other guy, and I was like, Innovation? He's like, yes, I fucking love Innovation. He's my favorite because he never loses his cool. I was like, yeah, cool. And he's like, oh, yeah. He's like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, I cast tournaments and stuff. He's like, oh, okay. He's like, oh, he's like, oh, I always watch BlizzCon. And I was like, you always watch BlizzCon? And I was like, he's like, yeah, I'm really surprised. I've never seen any Australians. I'm like, what? Me and Maynard. No. And he's like, oh yeah, I watch, and he's like looking through his phone. He's like, oh yeah, I watch this one. It's like Beastie Cutie's channel. He's like, I watch this guy. It's like Winter's channel. He's like, I love TLO, I love Innovation. I watch BlizzCon. He's like, I've never heard of you. I had no idea there's any Australians involved in StarCraft. And I was like, oh. It was so funny, man. I was just like, ugh. And he's like, oh, sorry for not knowing who you are. And I was like, mate. So I let him into the other room. I have a trophy cabinet room, right? And it's basically, I was like, look at my rich mahogany. Look at this table. We killed a 6,000-year-old tree to make this table. I'm kind of a big deal. And he was like, oh, okay. Cool. If TLO's ever here, can you let me know so I can come get his autograph? And I'm like, what? And then he just is like, see ya, and like left. And I was like, it was great. No, it was actually a lot of fun. It was really